What is up, everybody? It's 2:20 in the morning here. I can't sleep, and work is only a few short hours away. And I figured I need to exhaust myself a little bit here, so I figured I'm gonna do a quick tutorial type thing on how to use compressors, or basically just what compressors are and the different features that come with the standard compressor. And for the sake of just trying to get it down, I'm only going to be using the standard compressor that comes with Pro Tools. Now there's countless compressors out there you can use, and some are better than others, but for the sake of argument, all of them are going to pretty much have the same general features that make up a compressor. And that's all I'm really using this for, is just showing you what makes up a compressor and basically how you can use it to achieve a certain sound. And I am going to be using it on a kick drum today. I really don't even necessarily need a compressor on the kick drum. I'm using Steven Slate, which I believe has all this type of processing already done to it. But I feel like the kick drum, you can kind of get a better feel for what's happening when you change these different settings. So I'm not trying to get a specific sound today. I'm just trying to get you to hear what happens when you tweak different settings, so you can figure out where to apply a compressor, when it's needed, and where you can use it to get the sound you want. So every compressor basically has the same types of settings. You're going to have basically a threshold, a gain compensation, your attack, your release, your ratio, and your knee. And again, depending on what compressor you're using, they might call certain things, different names, but they're all basically doing the same thing. And I hate to make such generalizations, but I'm not going to try to describe every compressor out there and what they call things. So, alright, so jumping in, I'll show you what the kick sounds like without the compressor on. So, nothing too glamorous by itself, but let's see what happens to the signal when you start to mess around with these settings. So the first thing you'd want to probably look at would be your threshold, and what this does is this tells you when the compressor turns on. So when you start sending a signal through it, depending on where you set this level, and it's measured in dB, decibels, this will tell it when that signal needs to be compressed. And again, depending on what compressor you're using, there probably will be some sort of visual aid that comes along with it, either via graph, like you can see here, or a meter. You'll be able to see kind of what's happening to the signal. So let me show you what happens when we take this threshold and we kind of adjust it and move it around. And I'm going to start at 0 dB, which basically means there's going to be no compression happening. This signal is going to pass all the way through unaffected. So let's check it out. Alright, so you see the level of the kick's going, my threshold's up here, nothing's happening with it. I'm not putting this threshold down below where the noise ceiling is. So if I take this threshold and I start lowering it down below where this level is, you'll start to see something happening right around here. And what this is your gain reduction. This is basically how much of the signal is being compressed. And all this will be important, and I'll show you in a couple minutes, seconds here, why this is important. Now, where you set this really depends on what you're trying to achieve out of it. If you're trying to do something like a excuse me, a limiter, or something along those lines, you generally want to set your threshold pretty high, because you just want to compress that top level of the signal. You want to just smash the hell out of it. But if you're just trying to kind of level out the peaks a little bit of a signal, you might want to set this right around the meat of the signal, kind of where it's centered around. And I'm going to use this gauge here, this meter here, to tell me where I want to set this. I'm going to try to get about 3 dB of gain reduction. And that's basically telling me that I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Alright, so if I set this, it looks like it's around negative 17 decibels. I'm going to leave that there for now, and I'm going to move over to ratio over here. And what this tells you is when that signal, when your original signal passes above this threshold, so right here, as soon as it passes this point, everything above it will be compressed by this ratio. A 3-to-1 signal means for every 3 dB above your signal, it's going to compress down so that only 1 dB is actually coming out, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense, but now if you raise this up, let's say to 100-to-1, or otherwise a limiter, a brick wall limiter, as you might have heard before, it's saying that basically for every 100 dB above this threshold, you're only getting 1 dB rise. So if you think about that, that's smashing the shit out of your signal, and that means that you're pretty much getting no peaks. It's pretty much going to be level across the board. Doesn't matter if it's coming you know, any little bit up here, it's just smashed down and being flattened. And what that allows you to do, if you see here, your gain reduction now went from, let's say, a 1-to-1 where you're applying no compression, meaning if 1 dB above your threshold, you get 1 dB above it, there's no compression. Obviously you can see that because there's no gain reduction happening here. As you start to increase that, you can see how that signal is starting to get squashed down. Now you're losing about 3 dB of volume out of that. And if you go all the way up to 100 dB, or again or 100-to-1, again like a limiter, you're approaching like a -5, -6, -4, somewhere in that ballpark. What that allows you to do is to flatten the signal so you don't get those loud peaks every once in a while that kind of drive your noise ceiling, and it allows you to pump more volume into it. So if I go up all the way to the another 5 dB of gain compensation to make up for that reduction, you can hear how much more powerful that signal is. So without, with. Well, got a little crazy there, but so that's how you can set your threshold, set your ratio, and make up what your gain reduction is with your gain compensation here. And that's how you can get more power out of a mix or out of a certain instrument. Now for a kick, I'm not trying to get too crazy. I just want to smooth it out a little bit. I'm only going to go with a ratio of 3-to-1, meaning for every 3 dB above my threshold, the output will only be 1 dB. You're only getting 1 dB increase above that. And again, if I do that, I'm getting about 3 dB of gain reduction. I'm going to pump about 3 dB back into it to make up for that, because I don't want my signal to get squashed to be quiet. I just want to smooth out the dynamics a little bit and allow me to get some more oomph into the kick, or into the instrument, or into the whole mix. Now before I get to attack and release, the other thing you're going to see in most compressors, or all compressors I guess, hopefully they have this, is what's called your knee. And if you look on your graph here, again, this is, hopefully your compressor has a graph too, but you can see, it's kind of subtle I guess on the camera here, but you can see when you go from a 0 dB, you have a pretty rigid transition at the point of where your threshold is. I'm sorry, I probably forgot to point that out here. Your threshold, you can see by that yellow line, gold line, orange line, whatever it is. This marks the point in which your signal is compressed. So here it's all unaffected, 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 and then at this point you have that 3-to-1 ratio compression happening. And that's why you have that slope going from a 1-to-1 up to a 3-to-1 slope. So the knee is basically how quickly that compressor happens. If you have a 0 dB, that means that it suddenly just pops on. As soon as it hits that threshold, that compression is going to kick on. If you go all the way up, you can see it's a little more gradual. It starts to affect it a little bit before the threshold and kind of goes a little bit past it. it's a pretty subtle effect. For the sake of using compression for the beginning, it's not the most crucial thing you need to worry about, but most of the time I'll set it probably to a low knee. You know, I want it to kick on pretty. I want it to kick on. What's the word? I don't want to say pretty quickly because that's what we're going to get to in a second, but it's going to be more of a instantaneous effect. But again, it's pretty subtle in most situations. Now the last two settings that you're going to find on typical compressors is your attack and your release, and arguably probably the two most difficult things to understand about compressors. And that's again why I chose to use a kick, because here you're going to be able to hear what these are doing more so than, you know, vocals perhaps, or I guess a snare would have been a good choice too. So if we take I'm just going to set these down to as fast as they go. And what this means, we'll start with attack here. What this means is when this signal crosses into your threshold, how quickly the compressor turns on. And again, I know that might be confusing based on what the knee was, but try to think about this just separately here. So once that signal passes your threshold, this is how quickly it takes before that compressor actually begins to happen. And it's not anything necessarily you can you know, we're not talking seconds here, we're talking microseconds, upwards of milliseconds. But the effect is, though, it may sound like not much, it can be pretty powerful. So let me show you here with the kick. If we go to basically immediate attack versus a long attack, you can see on your gain reduction, you have no gain reduction happening here, which is basically telling you the signal, it basically is waiting so long to compress before the next hit that nothing's even happening, versus as soon as that signal crosses, boom, it's compressed. You're getting that 6 dB compression out of it. Now if you can hear what's happening, maybe I'll put my release up so you can hear the attack a little bit clearer. You can hear how much quieter that is, and how much flat and dead it sounds. Just think about a kick drum in terms of what it's doing. When you take that beater and you hit the head of the bass drum, the kick drum, blah, that initial sound, that initial slap of the beater, if that surpasses this point and you have your attack pretty much immediate, you're getting none of that feel of the beater. You're kind of just getting slapped right into compressing it by 3-to-1 ratio, 3 dB compensation. You're pretty much getting a dead, consistent, it's always making the same noise every time. You get no feel out of it, you get none of the transients. It's just a dead sound. So that's, you don't want to go too quick on your attack because you kill the life of the kick drum and what, you know, that natural feel of it, the natural slap of it. So again, it's just lifeless. Nothing's happening. Here you can hear a little bit more of that thump. So thump and then it kicks in. Thump and then it kicks in. So you get that initial hit and that variance of emotion or feel and attack and a power. You get to feel that before the compressor kicks in and then levels it out. And again, we're only talking microseconds here, so it's just enough to let that initial hit through before that signal kicks in. So that's where your attack is coming into play. And again, if you set that attack up enough, it's allowing it to pass through long enough. As you can see here, that red box, it's going up long enough and doesn't even have time to compress. Now again, I'm trying to just show you the settings of compressors, you know, using a kick drum, but again, this can apply to any instrument. Snare is a big one. If you think about a snare, that first hit, or that, I shouldn't say the first hit, but the, you know, initial contact of the stick with the snare head has a little bit of life to it. So you don't want to smash it by putting the attack too low. You want that initial hit to go through before you compress the sound of the snare. So this is, I don't know if what the best way to say it is, but I guess this affects how much personality each hit has, how much life it has before you smooth out the signal. Because again, the purpose of a compressor is to control the dynamics of a signal. So the attack is really how you affect the overall dynamic of the signal, overall feel of the signal. Do you let more of the initial sound through, or do you try to smash the hell out of it and make it more consistent and not as dynamic, I guess you can say. So for this kick drum, I'm going to set it at a, let's see, let me hear it. I like around there. You can hear the thump of the hit, and you still get some good meat out of it, some good power. And you can see this again will affect your gain reduction. So in the end, you might need to tweak your gain compensation signal. Really, I just set it initially to, hell, I didn't even need to set it initially, but just to get some more power into it while we do this test. Alright, so if you look at the release of the signal, this is basically the same thing as attack, only now it's on the back end of the signal. It's how fast after the signal is compressed that the compressor releases itself. And again, if you wait too long, it's a little more subtle of an effect, but if you wait too long, you're pretty much holding onto that compressor, and the next hit that comes in is hitting, and its previous signal is technically still being compressed. So what that can do is that can lead to some weird effects, especially if you like a fast kick drum and you have a long release. It starts sounding real sloppy. You got the old signal still being held onto, and you got the new signal being compressed. It can get real messy. You can start to lose some of the tightness of the signal. Adversely, if you put it too quickly, you can get what's called, what's the official name, but you get like a pumping sound to it, because it's kicking and it's trying to pull it right back out immediately. So you're compressing and you're trying to pull it back immediately. Compressing, pull it back immediately. You get with this pumping sound that you definitely want to stray away from. It doesn't sound good. It's not doing anything for you. So that's the two boundaries you need to look at. You need to, too long and you get sloppy, too quick and you start pumping the signal. So a good release time is you want it to hit, you want it to get that compression, and you want it to drop off nicely before the next hit. And this is really going to depend on the instrument. It's going to depend on how, the tempo of the song, how many hits are going through, just something to keep the mix tight, and still give you that desired life out of whatever instrument you're trying to compress. So let me see what I want to do here. Here. Alright, so now that we got those settings, I'm going to adjust my gain compensation here. You can see I'm about -6 on most hits, maybe just below it. So I'm going to keep it at 5.6 there. Alright, so now we've adjusted kind of some of the basic settings here, in a basic way I should say. So let's look without compressor, bypass, and with. You hear that power you can get. Okay, so that's how you can use a compressor to get some some more power out of an instrument to level some of or smooth some of the dynamics. And again, I don't know. I know from a beginner standpoint, some of these settings like attack and release can be confusing, but hopefully this gave you a chance to see how that sounds affected. And one thing I didn't do, maybe I will. I was hoping it'd be a little more noticeable than that. Again, this is, I was thinking a kick drum would give you a good idea of what this attack and release was doing, but again, Stephen Slate drums already, I think, have some pre-processing done to it. So I'm not doing myself too many favors by applying more compressor, but in fact, in this mix, I don't even have compressor on the kick, but that wasn't the point of what I was doing this for. This was, again, more or less just to show you what these options do and how you can apply that to other instruments. So it's 2:40 in the morning. I think I could finally go to bed. So hopefully this did something for you. Until next time, see ya.